Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. So in this video I'm going to show you some asterisk patterns with JavaScript. We basically want to write some functions that when you call them print out asterisks for us. This video is actually an introduction to my GitHub repository where you can find tons of asterisk patterns with their relevant functions. And I'm going to drop down the link into the description for you guys. This is the GitHub repository that I'm talking about. Obviously you can see a lot of asterisk patterns, so it is a good practice for beginner developers, especially those who are coding in JavaScript. So after learning all of these asterisks, I think you have a good understanding of for loop in JavaScript. So feel free to check them out. So let's start from the first one, which is only one asterisk. So we are in jspin.com website, which is a playground for front-end languages. I'm going to drop down the link into the description too. So next thing I'm going to do is to write down the pattern in this JavaScript environment. So the first pattern was only one asterisk, and obviously we need to comment it out. And this is how you comment things in JavaScript for multiple lines. So next thing I'm going to do is to define a function, and this is how we do it in JavaScript. This is the keyword in JavaScript for function. It means that we are declaring a function. So after that, we need a name for it. Let's call it pattern1, for example. So after that, we need to open up parentheses. This is where the parameter of functions go. So for now, we don't have any parameters, so I'm going to leave it empty. After that, I'm going to open up curly braces. So this is actually the function body. I can write whatever I want in here. And how do I call a function in JavaScript? It's easy. We just write the name and parentheses in front of it. Now the question is, how can I log this asterisk into the console? Well, that's easy. We can use a built-in function in JavaScript, which is called console.log. And inside this console.log, I'm gonna write my asterisk. Then hit the run button on the right side of the screen. And there you go, my friends. You can see that asterisk is being printed out. This is actually our second pattern of asterisk. And the way we do it, we need a function again, obviously. So let me call it pattern2. And we edit in here too. And now we need a for loop because we want to repeat something. So let's define our initializer variable. I'm going to call it I. I'm going to start from 1, and so we need a condition. As long as the condition is true, the block of code is going to be repeated. Now I'm going to pass an argument into my function, and then how can I get the argument? I'll get it as a parameter in here. Let's call it n, so we can use this n anywhere inside our function. So the condition of my for loop is going to be less than or equal to n. After that, I need an increment or decrement for my for loop, which is optional. You can, for example, we can write it in here, but you don't have to. You can write it at the end of your for loop. But the best practice, I guess, it is to have it in here, inside your for loop. So after that, we need to open up curly braces for our for loop. And we want to have this console.log inside our for loop. So in this way, our function is going to print out asterisk every time in a new line for us. So let's hit the run button and see the results. And there you go, my friend. You can see the 5 lines of asterisks. And now let's tackle our third problem, which is 5 asterisks in a row. So let's call our function pattern3 because it is the third one. And again, it is our argument is going to be 5. We get it as a parameter named n. And so there is a slight difference in here. And that is we need a variable to store our asterisks every time. Let's define a variable in here. I'm going to call it row. And at first, it is empty. So it is like a container. And every time that my for loop is going to run the block of code for me, is going to add an asterisk into it. And how do we do it? Simply by writing row plus equal asterisk. So every time this for loop runs this block of code, is going to add 1 asterisk into the row variable for me. And now the way we print it out is again with the console function, which is a built-in function in JavaScript. And we hit the run button, and there you go, my friend, you have 5 asterisks. So now our next problem is a column of asterisks. This is a column of asterisks, and which in every row we have 5 asterisks. So first of all, let's declare a variable to store every row in it. I'm going to call it call, and at first, obviously, it is an empty string. So now we need nested loops. Nested loops are actually loops inside each other. It is nothing more than that. And again, my initializer is going to be I, and it starts from 1. And my condition is as long as I is less or equal than n, and every time I'm going to increment it by 1. So inside my first for loop, I need a for loop for every row. So let's declare another variable and call it row. At first, it's obviously again an empty string, and then for my second for loop, I need another initializer, so I'm going to call it j because it has to be different than the previous one. This is a good practice because sometimes we need to use this I inside our second loop or third loop. And I'm going to start from 1 again. So the condition of my for loop is going to be less than or equal to n. And my step is 1, so I'm going to increment it by 1. Every time I'm going to store 1 asterisk in my row variable. And at the end of my first for loop, I'm going to store all the rows inside my column. And you know, we need a new line for every row. So this is how you do it in almost any programming languages. Last thing we need to do is to print out call variable, which has all the asterisks, all the rows inside it. And there you go, we got the pattern. And the reason we have this quotation in here is because of JSPin websites. Actually, if you hit F12 in your keyboard, you're going to see the pattern in the console of your browser. So my friends, next thing we need to do is to print out this pattern into console. It is like a triangle. It starts from 1 asterisk to 5 asterisks. So every time it adds 1 asterisk to every row. So again, we need nested loops. We need a call variable, and so I'm gonna just edit my previous function, and let's see what's gonna happen. So let's call it pattern 5. Again, in here, I'm gonna call it pattern 5. So we need a column to store every row in it, and we need a for loop, which starts from 1. So the condition of my for loop is going to be less than or equal to n, and I'm going to increment it by 1. And every time, so we need a row variable too. Every time we're going to store our variable inside it. For our second for loop, again, we need an initializer, and then we need a condition. But this is where things get interesting. So, you know, my friends, if you leave it like in here, we're gonna get 5 asterisks in every row. But there is a pattern in here. Every time 1 asterisk is added to every row. So what does that mean? That means this condition has to be relevant to I. And you obviously guessed it. It's just I itself. At first row, the I is 1. When the I is 1, our condition for our internal loop is j less than or equal to I. So because I is going to increment every time. For every row, we have a different I. And the rest is the same. We're going to store asterisks inside our row and store all the rows inside call. And for every row, we need a new line. And at the end, we need to print out our column. And let's click the run button in here, and hopefully we're going to get the triangle pattern of our asterisks on the right side. And there you go, my friend, we got it. Next thing we need to do is to print out this pattern, which is actually our 6th pattern. So again, I'm gonna edit the previous function. Let's call it pattern 6. And again, we need a call to store every row in it. Yes, that's true. Again, we need a for loop which starts from 1, and as long as it is less than or equal to n, it's going to be incremented. So again, we need a for loop, and as long as our initializer is less than or equal to n, we're going to repeat this block of code. And then we need a row variable to store every row in it. And then we are going to have a for loop, and in here we can edit our condition and make it like j less than or equal to n. There's something that you need to know in here, my friends. We need a condition in here. So as you see, the first asterisk is where the I and j are both 1. And the second one is where the I and j are both 2, I and j both 3, I and j both 4, I and j both 5. So that means every time I and j are equal, we're going to have an asterisk. So we write our condition like in here. If this condition is true, we're going to have an asterisk. Let me put the row in here. And if it is not true, which we are going to use else, we're going to have a space. So again, at the end, we're going to store all our rows inside our column variable. And at the end of every row, we're going to have a new line. So finally, my friends, we're going to print out the call into our console. And there you go, my friend, it is working. And I told you before, this quotation is because of the JSPin website. You can see the asterisks being printed out into my console by clicking F12 in your keyboard. And that's it, my friends. If you like this video, please like and subscribe and share it with your friends. And if you have any ideas to make my videos better, please write it in the comments below. Thank you so much.